Okay, well, I'm going to start rolling then.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Oh, I think that's us.
Okay.
And with that, the longest theme song in all of show business begins our show. Welcome back to Cinema Smackdown for February 3rd, 2019. I'm Michael Brody, and I am joined today by Shane Simmons, who's watching my microphone.
I'm watching it break the studio again.
As we speak.
I'm pretty sure this whole studio has passed its warranty.
By about 35 years. So I was getting ready to leave the house today, feeling a little extra cold, a little uncomfortable, looking at the window, thinking about the travel time, and realizing I'd gotten up early and made all of this effort so we could come down here and talk about more M. Night Shyamalan movies, and I just got a little bit
Well, you
sad.
are the super fan, aren't you?
I honestly got a little bit sad just thinking about it. Like,
Come on. No, I know. I happen to know you're the biggest fan of Rosie O'Donnell nun comedies.
I have seen that movie.
You have.
You
are the only one, by the way.
I have seen them all. I have even seen his buried first film, which we'll get to.
Oh, okay.
At a certain point.
Well, you're going to have to enlighten this, because I have not seen the super early Shyamalan.
No, nor will you.
Opuses.
Nor will anyone. It's been buried. It's been very effectively
Is that the one
buried.
where he basically plays himself?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because that's Shyamalan playing himself or versions of himself in his films. That seems to be a common thread when it comes to... he's taken the whole Hitchcock cameo thing to the most self-indulgent level possible.
I have no idea what you mean. I'm sure I've never mentioned that on the show before, nor does it bother me in the least. Because his cameo in Glass was so subtle. It was so subtle.
Oh, well, you know, there was an effort at continuity there.
I mean, it's like what you mentioned last week. Compared to his cameo in The Lady in the Water, it is...
That is the greatest director cameo of all time.
It's the one that should put you in, well, that's it, you had your shot, you're in director jail, you can never come out. I think...
It should have put him in actor jail.
On the basis of what he says in that movie, which I guess we'll get to in order...
We'll try. Yeah.
It's repellent. It's career-ending as far as I'm concerned. Nobody should be allowed to do that.
It is the apex of his ego.
It makes
unbridled.
It makes what Kevin Spacey did look like nothing.
It makes you long for Kevin Smith to do yet another Silent Bob.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting as he's lost about 150 pounds and is playing Silent Bob again and will look like...
Couldn't he play Jay instead? That'd be an interesting switch.
I think Jay's
if Jason Mewes got fat and they just switched roles.
I kind of love that idea.
Yeah, I think it's... Tell you, I'm full of pitches.
It could certainly be the basis for another one of their god-awful reality shows.
like Jay and Silent Bob switch bodies.
Exactly.
That'll be the next one.
That would be a
Everyone wants to see that movie before Yoga Hosers.
You know they have like 1,000 episodes of a podcast called Jay and Silent Bob Get Old.
They got old for me around Mallrats time.
Yeah, that's about right. My favorite piece of trivia about Mallrats is that, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Clerks was enough of a hit that a major studio greenlit Mallrats with a real budget, like a $10 million budget, something crazy like that. Especially by today's standards, it'd be about that much money. But at the time, they were fine with everything he wanted, but they didn't want Jason Mewes. They basically looked at his performance and said, that guy's clearly just some creepy drug addict who's going to ruin our movie.
And they were right.
So they recast him, which means they literally went out and auditioned dozens of stoner types, including Seth Green and Breckin Meyer and a bunch of other guys from the era who were just right for it. And every one of them in the audition said, but I've seen Clerks. Did Jay die?
They could have gotten Brad Pitt in his Floyd from True Romance era.
He'd already done 7 by then, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's around that era. It's right around that era. So, yeah.
Well, hey, speaking of directors I hate, Gus Van Sant. So, wait, we're not doing Gus Van Sant. No.
I hate Gus Van Sant a lot less.
You do hate him a lot less than I do.
Yeah, I mean, Gus Van Sant's made 4 or 5 movies I like, and
the paint drawing ones?
If you've ever, not those, if you've ever listened to an interview with Gus Van Sant, he's very pleasant. He really is. He's a lovely tone of voice.
No reflection on the man himself. Maybe he's a lovely person, but almost all of his films I loathe.
There's a couple of good ones in there, but we're not talking about Gus Van Sant today. That'll be
No. Okay, so on to Sofia Coppola. So.
Oh wow. You're definitely picking all the winners.
Here's the thing. I like M. Night Shyamalan.
Should we just do a Michael Bay, Zack Snyder episode? I mean, I think that's a little bit...
No.
Each of which have made one movie I've liked.
More about crapping on the quirky people as opposed to the giant blockbuster arseholes.
Yeah, at this point, with the full body of work that we can see from M. Night Shyamalan, which stretches back just a little bit more than 20 years now, because he's been working... His Rosie O'Donnell movie is, I think, from 98 or something like that.
That sounds about right.
97, 98.
Sixth Sense was 99.
I don't count... actually, Wide Awake, which is his Rosie O'Donnell movie, is from 98. His movie Praying with Anger, which is, at best, a student film, is from 92. So you can't count that. It was also never released. But he's been working for 20 years, and I think it's pretty safe to say at this point he needs to stop, and he's terrible. And you saying you kind of like him...
I think he's magnificent. He's my favorite guy.
It does make me a little bit angry. So we're going into...
Well, we're gonna be fighting because I am an M. Night Shyamalan apologist.
I was a supporter of his work straight through and including the first massive stumble film, which is Lady in the Water. I was fully on board apologizing for the things that were wrong with Signs, the things that were wrong with The Village, and the things that were wrong with Lady in the Water. That's 3 in a row.
Oh, really? I didn't know you were that much of an apologist for Lady in the Water, because
at the time,
I defend that film to a degree.
Right. So
I understand why it annoys the hell out of people, because it is the most Shyamalan-y of all Shyamalan films.
And it has no ending, and it doesn't really make any sense, and it is so self-important.
Yeah, it is an exercise in self-indulgence like few other films have ever been. But I appreciate it's certainly a reflection of him as a person.
It feels like
he needed to put that out there, and he sure did.
Like on multiple levels, that movie feels like he's trying to start a religion. So there's the I'm the greatest person who's ever lived religion, where he becomes his own cult of personality. And there's also whatever the folklore of Lady in the Water is, that also seems to be its own religion that makes almost no sense and has a giant eagle coming in to eat the world, or whatever the point of the ending is. Anyway, there is some great filmmaking, however, in that movie, but you have to remove his entire performance and everything it stands for, everything that Shyamalan's own performance stands for. You have to really hardcore pretend you didn't see the scene where he tells you that he is a more important person than any film critic that's ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
That scene
he certainly did himself
so damning.
He did himself no favors by portraying the film critic as the worst person in the world, Bob Balaban.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still hear film critics referring back. Every time they review one of his films, they refer back to Lady in the Water, saying, he really doesn't like film critics.
Yeah, and there's also the other thing you have to ignore in Lady in the Water is you have to ignore every single time in the movie that anyone in the cast has a wide-eyed, open-mouthed moment of, I get it, I get how magical this all is, which is every 3 minutes in that film. Everybody is so enraptured with these special moments. It's the movie I've seen in my life that has the most special moments, where the director's constantly telling you, this is an important film.
Yeah, well, the thing I do like about the film is that the theme is about storytelling, and we're presented with a bunch of characters, and we're supposed to assume what archetypes and what roles they're supposed to be playing in the story, and the twist, because there always has to be a twist, because it's M. Night Shyamalan, is that nobody fills the role they think they're supposed to be filling in the storytelling role.
Mm-hmm.
So, it has fun with that. It does stink of what it is, which is a bedtime story he used to tell his kids.
But again...
But adapted for the big screen. That's usually a mistake.
I get what you're saying, but again... And the thing is, I keep saying negative things about this movie, where it's the last one I'll defend. It's quite frankly the last one of his movies I still like, to a degree. But if you make comments like, well, those are bad doctors, because what is that story? Because it makes no sense and has no ending. So when...
Well, that's the problem. The story is ultimately a bedtime story I just pulled out of my ass to tell my kids when they're going to sleep.
I go with that. That works fine for me, but...
there are other directors who have done that. It's like, I kind of collaborated with my kids to make this. I prefer that a million times over, for example, what came out of Robert Rodriguez when he did the same thing.
Yeah, admittedly, Lady in the Water is the last good movie he made, because it has real filmmaking in it, real scenes, real moments, and I will argue with you that there is not one movie after that. I'm going to glance quickly at the list of all the films that come after it. Not one movie after that has a single scene in it that I like. Not one. That's just, you can't argue with my opinion. My opinion is, for me, there is not one other good scene.
You are not permitted to have opinions that differ from mine. You are guilty of wrongthing, sir.
Let's be clear. After Lady in the Water, there are 6 movies.
There's a lot.
6 movies. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Even though we're about to take a commercial in a minute, let's go back to the beginning. And I will just briefly touch on the fact that he made a little student film called Praying with Anger, which I think he made with his own money. I'm not looking at any information right now. It's been years since I've researched this. And it's just a movie about a young man who is born in America but has roots in India and decides to take a trip back and rediscover them. And it is not a very good film, but you can see the earnest attempt to just... It's one of those movies.
My question is, how old was he at the time?
He's like 21.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sort of film a 21-year-old will make, right. And it's him learning his craft. So fine.
I'd argue that it's actually a movie in search of a story. I think it's one of those. Wow, I wish I had something to say, but I really don't because I'm so young and have no ideas. So I'll just talk about my family and their disappointments and my disconnection with my own culture.
And I'll star in it myself because I know I'll work cheap.
Right. It's a perfectly valid little student film to make, but it doesn't show much promise. It really just looks like somebody had a little too much money in the family.
Well, they all can't be Orson Welles right out of the gate.
Right. So we moved from that one to him actually getting some studio money and making a movie with Rosie O'Donnell and a little kid called Wide Awake, which is about a little kid who's struggling with his belief in God. That's pretty much what the whole movie is about, is there a God? Yeah, well, there's certainly a theme that will come up.
Yes, there's a Catholic, or at least Christian theme that runs through Shyamalan's work, because I'm assuming, I don't even know this because I haven't bothered to watch many interviews with him, but I'm assuming he's a Christian guy, and this is central to his worldview. And it just keeps coming up as a theme here and there.
Or like me, he considers it mythology and enjoys talking about it like that. But there's no way, based on how many times he brings it up and how important a theme it seems to be. Anyway, we'll continue talking about M. Night Shyamalan's fascination with Jesus right after these messages from people who are not busy promoting Jesus.
Jesus didn't really die for our sins. What a twist!
I like that. I had de-mic'd myself, but not you, right as you were saying that. Just let it run, because going somewhere. Anyway, we only have a minute and 10 seconds. That's all. It's 2 very short promos. Same thing on the second round. It's only 2, not even a minute the second time around.
Yes, I think we'll have a lot more to say about his career where it goes wrong.
I'm starting with where it went wrong.
Well, we need to cover those first. The stretch of 3, 4, 5 movies that are,
Triumphs. So that's ad 1. Here's ad 2.
Hey kids, you like heavy and hard music?
What the hell is this?
I didn't want to play the goddamn movie show one again, so I chose
thank God.
Random other stuff.
I'm so sick of hearing that one.
Well, there's 5 of them, but they're identical.
Tune in on Mondays with Hunter and JP from 2 to 3 p.m. on CJLO 1690 AM.
Welcome to the ritual.
Is this the last? Okay.
Welcome back to the show. This is Cinema Smackdown on CJLO 1690. I am Michael Brody, and I am joined today, for the first time ever...
First time.
By Shane.
We have not done this 1,000 times in a row.
Sure, that sounds reasonable. I'm pretty sure there's a first-time listener out there somewhere who might buy that.
Even though we're now uploading this to a YouTube channel, I've literally lost count of how many episodes we did before I started doing that.
Yeah, you're going to have to promote that a little bit better. We've been talking about it off air.
Yeah, well, go to YouTube and look up Cinema Smackdown. You'll find it.
Or, if you want to hear these episodes sound anything like they do when we air them, you could go to our website on cjlo.com and actually listen to the rips straight off the air, which essentially sound like a professional podcast.
Yeah, much more professional, as opposed to the flip camera that's capturing us in progress. But, you get to see what we talk about in the commercial breaks.
Admittedly, it is very interesting that those exist, these almost raw footage versions of what you're doing.
It's like a found footage horror film, complete with shaky cam and screaming.
Well, again, today we're talking about M. Night Shyamalan movies, and much like a shaky cam found footage movie, I'm going to go back to his movie Wide Awake, which, he made for his studios. It's Shyamalan's first movie for a studio, which the big star in the movie is Rosie O'Donnell playing a nun.
Now, is this hot off her, East of Eden S&M film?
It's around that era.
Yeah.
So it's a little later, but she just plays a no-nonsense, completely Catholic nun. There's no wiggle room of her maybe doubting something. No, she's just there to be an iron will of God is the way for the kid in it as he struggles through. Anyway, that's as much as I remember
That
about
sounds
that
like
movie.
a very strange choice for Hollywood.
I will say that entire movie, as my recollection, because I did see it after I saw Sixth Sense, it feels like the same director. It has all the same little dramatic touchstones. It doesn't go very far, and it is a real PG movie. But it even ends with sort of a haunting moment of the kid moving forward in his life, and a fade in of a film by M. Night Shyamalan. Which feels oddly out of place.
I'm sure he was very proud.
I'm sure he was, but no one's ever seen this movie.
Anyone who gets to direct a Rosie O'Donnell starring vehicle has to be proud.
So a few years later, by which I mean one.
Yeah.
1 year later.
Well, what a strange transition from that to this.
From nowhere, we have a movie called The Sixth Sense, which is a worldwide phenomenon. And my favorite thing to mention about The Sixth Sense is not about M. Night Shyamalan. It's about Bruce Willis's career at that point. Because this is a movie where Bruce Willis plays an authority figure who mentors a small child through a difficult period. I mean, that's a pretty
That's
fair
essentially it.
description.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis's prior movie to The Sixth Sense is a little film called Mercury Rising, where he plays an authority figure who mentors a small child through a difficult period. And it is uncanny how close these two movies are, except for the fact that in The Sixth Sense, he plays a therapist. And in Mercury Rising, he plays a man with a gun, hell-bent on shooting anyone in the face who gets between him and this kid.
So, standard Bruce Willis role A.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just quickly to promote the Mercury Rising movie, I will mention that it features a performance by Alec Baldwin as a hard-nosed government guy who's willing to kill anybody who might get in the way of his government programs, including a 10-year-old child who accidentally de-encrypts the new government program because he's autistic. As we all know from Shane Black movies like The Predator, any autistic child can decrypt anything just by looking at it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Hollywood trope, yeah.
Yeah. So
Also, Alec Baldwin not being nice to children is a bit of a Hollywood trope, too.
There is a wonderful
Or is that
moment-
just real life?
It's also real life. There is a wonderful moment in Mercury Rising where Alec Baldwin and Bruce Willis meet for the first time, and Alec Baldwin tries to sell Bruce Willis on the idea of it's more important for our country that things go badly and that we kill children than that we blah, 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 blah.
Wow, Jack Ryan got really dark.
In the middle of his hate speech about humans, Bruce Willis kicks Alec Baldwin in the chest in a move so brutal, it's just hilariously violent. It's just ridiculously, it's just, wow, that's a really awful speech you're making. I'm going to cut you off mid-sentence with a boot to the middle of your sternum. It's really something. It is the high point of that movie, and is the reason I own a DVD copy of it.
Yeah, okay, just play that in a loop then.
I quite enjoy it. But anyway, Bruce Willis decided, hot off that movie that made no money, that he would immediately jump into another film where he played essentially the same role in the same story arc, but with a twist ending this time. I mean, that's me really, really...
Well, I could only imagine this was probably one of those scripts that was going around town that was hot. And it wasn't until Bruce Willis said, hey, I want to do this, and you know what? Let's get the guy to actually direct it himself. I mean, I imagine it was...
It's possible.
It was Bruce Willis's clout that got that film made and made the way it got made.
Well, the thing is, the Sixth Sense is in that small category of movies where it comes out, it does okay, and then word of mouth catches fire, and everybody I knew talked about this movie and went to see it in the cinema. And there's only a handful of movies in my lifetime that has happened with, where things were such a shocking surprise to people that they saw it again, brought their friends, recommended it to everybody, and you weren't part of the conversation until you'd seen it. I'm actually hard-pressed to think of another one since 1999.
Yeah, it's rare. It happens occasionally where a film immediately enters a pop culture lexicon, and that one is one of the rare examples. So expectations for Shyamalan were very high immediately following that, where people were hailing him as a new Hitchcock, the new this, the new that. Everyone thought this was his first film, even though, as we pointed out, it wasn't. But it was certainly what put him on the map, and it put him on the map in such a big way that, we thought, oh, we have a new Spielberg on our hands.
Yeah.
And he started to disappoint people almost immediately.
Well, okay. Well, we move forward to...
I mean, we did talk about Unbreakable extensively last week, so we'll skip over it for the most part. But
I will mention that, yeah, when it came out, it was polarizing. People loved it, people hated it, and I'm one of the people who loved it, it's never been surpassed for me in the type of movie that it is, certainly in his filmography, in Bruce Willis's. It's the thing that just works the best for me, despite its many flaws that we got into last week.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, yeah, it was the first one where people really went, oh, that didn't work for me, or it was too precious in a lot of ways, or the ending really irritated people in some cases, including me.
It was also weird that it was a sort of deconstructionist superhero film when the superhero genre was still trying to get started in Hollywood.
Yeah, it was pre-Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was a year
same year as X-Men.
Sam Raimi's... Yeah, and the X-Men is one clunky superhero.
Oh, it sure is.
It has a lot of people defending it for such a horrible, horrible movie. Don't get me wrong, there's great things about that X-Men movie. Mainly in the casting.
Dramatic Winnebago rescue, not so much.
Yeah, well, but at any rate, it's certainly true that the superhero genre had not clicked. It was, in fact, 8 years away from becoming what it is now.
Right.
That's when Iron Man came out in 2007.
Yep.
So it was about a year after that the ball really started rolling, and we started to see movie after movie after movie. And by that I mean it was no longer just Elektra and Punisher sequels that no one wanted, or Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider movie.
Or yet another Blade film.
Exactly. These are things that were entering pop culture a little bit more heavily. Anyway, so Unbreakable was this little beautiful masterpiece movie that was loved and hated in pretty much equal measure.
Followed by Signs, which was even more divisive.
Exactly. Now, going back to his work on Wide Awake, it has an extremely Christian belief system running through.
Yeah, the upshot of the whole film is that it's a man rediscovering his faith in God.
Right. Now, I saw this movie with two people who became infuriated in the last act that they were being preached at. Whereas I am pretty resistant to any religious message in a movie, and I didn't take it that way at all. I just took it as a part of this story about these characters and their journey. Yeah. I didn't feel preached at in that particular instance.
Yeah, as we've discussed before, it is ultimately a series of events involving an alien invasion, and this guy, having gone through this journey and witnessing all he witnesses, his conclusion is, and therefore God must exist, so I've resumed my faith. Mm-hmm. And I'm perfectly fine with that character coming to that conclusion over those events.
Exactly.
It's not what I personally would have come to the same conclusion, but I'm content to watch a character do that.
Amazingly, it is the second film in a row in which water can kill a main character. Which
That's true.
An extremely strange through line in his work. I wonder if he has some...
And Lady in the Water is another water-based...
Yeah, he has some strange...
He has an issue
with liquids, I guess.
Yeah. Twist endings, Christianity, and water.
And water, yeah. As we've seen in our most recent film, Glass, water is definitely not our friend. Especially if you want a really lame, fizzling out ending.
And you know, water is ultimately the ending of The Happening because it feeds the plants.
Well, I mean, this is a weird time to bring it up, but it is a superhero movie thing. A strange trope that developed in the 2000s where it wasn't a superhero movie unless at the end of the film your heroes had to fight a sentient lake.
Yeah.
Which is
that kept
really
happening.
Weird, repeated. It is essentially the climax of the Hulk movie by Ang Lee, where he has to fight a sentient lake, and it is again sort of the antagonist at the end of the second X-Men movie, where it all becomes about them versus water for some reason.
Which, as I said, I prefer that to the trope that ultimately developed for Marvel films, where the heroes have to fight a bigger version of themselves.
Well, yeah, that's always been...
I'd rather watch them punch a lake.
But admittedly, even Spider-Man 2... The final act of Spider-Man 2 involves
That's true.
Spider-Man, water, Doc Ock, and again, there's a water
Yeah,
element.
ultimately the real threat becomes the water.
Yeah, it's... I mean, it's better than every single story having gasoline that could explode at any moment, but that's another hilarious trope that every single car in the world is just a bomb waiting to go off. In nearly every movie.
Was it the Texas Chainsaw 3 where the note came down from the studio saying, well, the car has to blow up? It's like, well, why? Because, well, there's fire near the truck. Therefore, people will expect it to blow up.
You can always rely on Cinema Smackdown for good Texas Chainsaw 3 trivia. It's our go-to trivia.
Well, we've talked about John Larroquette's involvement in radio and those films extensively.
That's a good point. So yeah, we talked at length about Unbreakable. We talked a little bit about Signs just now. There's not a lot to say about Signs. Signs is the first one that I saw where I thought, there's great scenes in this, and then there's entire sequences that feel like they were made by someone who doesn't understand anything. Just whole ideas that sit there strangely. There's a moment early in the film, I think, and it's been a while since I've seen Signs, where Joaquin Phoenix turns to Mel Gibson and says, we should try this thing. And Mel Gibson turns to him and goes, explain. One of them says that to the other. It's like, we should run around this house screaming and therefore scare off any intruders. And there's this complete disconnection between how real human beings talk and how these two people are communicating.
Yeah, that disconnection does crop up in various Shyamalan films.
Yeah, there's just an odd... My characters are now going to speak like robots for no reason, and you're not going to understand their motivation at all, so enjoy the next 10 seconds of that.
Yeah, occasionally in his films, you'll see character exchanges that happen that seem like, was this a temporary script thing that you forgot to fix later before you went to shoot it?
Or an acting exercise. Those kind of things where, like, just stand there and try to talk out your emotions in a robot way. That happens a lot. It certainly happens almost entirely throughout the entire movie, The Village. I would argue that everybody is acting that way in that film.
Yeah, The Village, that's the first one for me where... so his twist endings became a standard. It's like, okay, well, it's an M. Night Shyamalan film. There's going to be a twist. That was the first one where I figured it out, I believe, literally in the first shot of the movie.
Which is super irritating, because you're at... I agree with you. I had the same thought. Admittedly, though, Signs doesn't really have a twist in it.
Well, Signs is more about all these little details that converge in an interesting way, which is what restores Mel Gibson's faith in the film.
Right. Oh, Mel
so
Gibson,
it's a bit of a twist that way.
Mel Gibson, he's certainly had an interesting career, to say the least, in the last 10 years. He's soon to be seen in a movie, the movie I'm most looking forward to from 2019, which is called Dragged Across Concrete. It should be out any day now, in theory, based on the IMDb.
We're counting the minutes.
But as our listeners well know from our previous episode where Mel Gibson phoned in, he's a huge fan of CJLO 1690. I mean, that was like a 90-minute episode.
He calls in
right?
specifically to call us sugar tits. It is delightful when he does it.
I kind of like it, especially when it's directed at men. It just feels fresh.
My tits are indeed sugary.
Oh dear, let's not go down this road. So
you're the one who brought up Mel Gibson and how he loves us so much.
The name of the station. So yeah, we moved quickly into the village. So the village, yeah, it's a shame that movie has a twist at all, because it's one of the movies that works the best without that twist.
Yeah, it has a good creepy vibe to it, but immediately started to watch it as someone who knows how a magician is performing, like the trick that he's doing. He knows how it's done, and then I just want to watch it to see how well he executed it.
The thing is, though, in that particular case, you pull the twist out, and it's just a better movie.
It kind of is, yeah.
It doesn't need the ending. If you swap out, and we'll just go a little bit into spoilers here, and if you haven't seen The Village, you probably won't. So I guess
you're a bit late to the game, yeah.
But if the ending, instead of saying, go into essentially this other world and get some medicine, and it was more like, there's some tree bark that's on the other side of the forest, and if you go scrape some, we can save this guy, just swap that out. The movie works exactly as well without that huge letdown feeling of, yet again, ending on another wonderful M. Night Shyamalan cameo. Where he swoops in to wink at the camera and say, that's right, got you again, kids.
What a twist, except it's not so much what a twist that time.
But that movie does have 10 or 20 great little cinematic moments that feel fresh and interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's just because he had established himself as the surprise ending guy by that point. You immediately start watching it going, okay, what bits of disinformation is he feeding me that is going to turn out to be, surprise, I pulled the rug out from under you again.
Anyway, yeah, so I'm still with him in the village. Then we get to Lady in the Water in 2006, which we just talked about pretty much at length. I think we got through it in our opening,
Yeah, because it is the pivot point of his career, because that's the film. Even though we still mostly like it, most people gave up on him completely with that film.
I think most people gave up on him with The Village, but
no, I still know a lot of people who liked it and were fooled by the ending. So
wow,
yeah.
Were they fooled by the end of Tom Berenger's Shattered?
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, exactly. Nothing will prepare you for the end of Shattered except the first 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, these are people who clearly have never seen an episode of The Twilight Zone.
Right.
So,
or anything that goes somewhere slightly surprising.
Yeah.
With that ironic, you should have known this in the first 10 seconds bit.
Right, but Lady in the Water is really... between Shyamalan casting himself as the savior of the world by his brilliant writing that's going to cause him to martyr himself. Oh, God.
So we get to The Happening, which
you
and I saw together in the cinema, and we both watched that movie with this sense of, this is about to get good for the entire movie. It kept feeling like it was on the verge of getting good. And it was when the end credits hit, and there was no twist, and you realize all you've got is the concept that, and you'd better buy this, audience, nature turns against us, and we immediately start killing ourselves because, plants smell funny. And it is the worst film. It doesn't pay off, nothing works, and it's fronted by actor, and I say that with a huge underline, actor Mark Wahlberg, where he acts in every moment of the film. He's angrily emoting every word he says. It's unreal how terrible he is in that movie.
I defend that film as a slight misfire.
I'm just going to de-mic you now and murder you.
No, but see, my contention or defense of Shyamalan has always been, look, he makes little tiny genre films, and because The Sixth Sense was such a massive hit, everyone expects them to be the end of the world type of films. It's like, no, this is just a little Outer Limits episode. It's not a very good one, but it has mood. There are creepy moments that happen in that film that are genuinely a little skin crawly. And then, the payoff is like, oh, it's that? It's a little sad. I don't know if it was worth a whole movie for that, but okay, whatever.
It's been 11 years since I've seen it, so my recollection is the payoff is nothing.
Well, the payoff...
Doesn't it just stop happening at the end?
Yeah, but it's more about, well, why is this happening?
Wouldn't it have been great if the end of that movie was we fade back in on the title of the film, but then they also fade in the word stop in front of it? Stop happening. It's over.
Well, I remember at the time everyone was calling it What's Happening after that sitcom. So.
That works for me. That's a better title overall. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about that movie other than
it's garbage. And I'll just defend it saying it's very minor.
Wow, that's like the highest praise imaginable.
Well, yeah,
I think is that terrible.
For a film that everyone despises, that my defense of it is saying it's minor is high praise indeed.
Yeah, I think already you're getting into that zone where your defense of these movies is just going to make me want to go outside and bang my head against the wall.
Oh wait, that won't go on much longer.
So, I have seen his next movie, which is The Last Airbender. You skipped it, right?
That is the one I have not seen because I don't care.
It is a wildly terrible movie. It is completely misunderstanding how to tell a story. Chunks of that film make no sense whatsoever. The casting is awful. Characters scream their lines of dialogue.
If you want to crap on Shyamalan for one of his films, this is the film to crap on him for, because it was an existing property, and he was playing with someone else's toys, and by all accounts, he screwed it up.
Right.
So fine. I don't have an issue with people saying, I hated that one. Well, if you're an Airbender fan and someone makes a terrible Airbender film and assures that Hollywood will never be able to use the property again because it has such a bad association with it, yeah,
It is worth mentioning that The Last Airbender, I'm not actually sure if it comes from comics or just straight from a cartoon show, but I've seen the cartoon show, and it is delightful. It is a really great, weird little universe.
Yeah, I've never seen any of it, but I know there are a lot of super fans.
I haven't watched it in its entirety, but I've watched enough of season 1 of the original series to think this is pretty good. It's likable. It has enough depth, and the characters are going somewhere that you look forward to their journey. Whereas in the movie, they introduce people, it means nothing, and then there's all these awful shaky cam battle scenes that don't feel like anything. It's another example of movies that were all ruined by the Bourne franchise.
Oh, yeah.
Where the action doesn't need to actually be seen, and it's just the camera shooting around.
Has anyone bought Paul Greengrass a tripod yet? We have less shaky cam of this show.
All right, so that's plenty about the movie that no one liked ever on any level, called The Last Airbender. And we move into his next masterpiece, his descent into hell films of his career, which was After Earth from 2013.
Well, where does Devil fit in this?
Oh, that's right. I forgot to write it down.
It's around this time.
Around this time.
Yeah. Because he didn't direct it, but he worked on the story for...
Well, it was something he wrote, period, that then got other screenwriters to finish, but there is no point in that movie where it feels like anybody else worked on it but him.
Yeah, it's a very Shyamalan-y film. So.
And when you say minor, this is the most minor movie he's ever made.
It has a terrific setup, though. I really do enjoy the setup for this film,
I think if you really want to get into the setup of this movie, it has something to do with the fact that some architect somewhere decided, I need to make the biggest elevator in the world. Because this elevator is the size of a
It fits the entire cast, yeah.
And a camera crew.
Well, I'm talking about
the entire catering truck is in there.
The opening of the film starts with a body being discovered in a weird place and detectives deducing how it got there and where it's from originally. That part I like. Mm-hmm. Everything that follows, which is 90% of the movie, I'm less enthusiastic about.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a big Devil fan. I didn't like it. It has an awful, awful ending.
It is ultimately a closed room mystery, but the mystery turns out to be supernatural in nature, so therefore it's a big cheat.
Well, it just basically is, this is a mystery, look at every single tiny clue, we're going to keep giving you little clues, and then the big moment, the reveal is, oh yeah, those clues didn't matter.
Exactly.
So anything you put into this, you're not getting out of it. We're not going to reward you for paying any attention whatsoever.
It's presenting itself as a fair play mystery, and then the twist is, surprise, it's not. No. To which I have to respond, well, screw you then.
Yeah, so it's not a great movie. So we move from that to After Earth, his Will Smith vehicle that basically doesn't have any Will Smith in it.
Yeah. But it has plenty of Jaden Smith.
You gotta remember, at the time this movie came out, Jaden Smith had not yet become the sensation he is today, the clueless, white Batman costume wearing child who saunters into places basically screaming, I'm the most important person who's ever lived, love me, love me, love me. he hadn't quite hit that point yet.
I can't say I followed his career closely, and after seeing After Earth, I have no intention of ever following him again. He gives the worst performance I've ever seen in a motion picture in the entire history of cinema.
Clearly you haven't seen...
Since the kinetoscope.
Clearly you haven't seen his Karate Kid movie.
No, I have not. No, nor do I intend to.
So, I mean, you watched it a lot more recently than me. I saw it in 2013. Tell me your thoughts on After Earth without talking about performance.
Oh, God.
How good is it? Did he write it?
Yeah, he. I think it was someone else's script, and he did a pass on the script, so he has a secondary credit. It's written by someone and M. Night Shyamalan.
Just to be clear, it's not a wholly Shyamalan.
No,
property.
and it has no twist ending whatsoever because the end is something you can predict from a million miles away.
Right.
It plays out exactly as you think it's going to. There is no surprises to be had.
Essentially, the human race perseveres.
No, well, it's basically, my dad is this super brave guy who knows no fear, but I'm kind of scared of my own shadow, and I wanted to be a ranger like him, but I kind of washed out, and now we're in a bad survival situation, and I have to go be brave to do this thing, and there's a terrible monster that senses fear, and if it senses I'm afraid, it's going to eat me. So in the climactic moments, I have to overcome my fear to such a degree that I've become effectively invisible to this monster. And it all plays out exactly as you think it will.
Right. Yep, that's pretty awful.
Look, it might have been a passable little science fiction film had it had anyone else on the planet Earth in the lead, except this nepotism nightmare of Jaden Smith and his abysmal performance to a degree. I don't know. There's moments where I was watching that film saying, are they putting on an accent like we're future civilization thousands of years down the road, and so we all have this slightly odd accent? I'm not sure because most of the talking is done by Jaden Smith, who is constantly mispronouncing words. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's intentional or just part of his awful abysmal
it might
acting.
Just be his level of ability.
Because he even has opening narration, and I'm going, what? Why are you pronouncing things like this? It's really upsetting to listen to. And there's no indication about why this might be, other than either he's terrible or it's some futuristic accent, which no one else in the film seems to be trying to achieve.
No, agreed. It's rough when that happens. At any rate, so After Earth, is it your bottom film for Shyamalan? Not that we're rating these necessarily.
Based on his performance alone, yes. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, because the next one is The Visit. And No, it's not?
No, you're forgetting.
What am I forgetting?
You're not forgetting it because you've never seen it.
Oh.
But there's a blip in between, and I'm going to go to his TV work.
Oh, okay.
M. Night Shyamalan did a TV episode. He directed a pilot for a show called Wayward Pines. And Wayward Pines is a horror suspense show about someone waking up in a small town and is not able to leave that small town. And the pilot is perfect. It's a wonderful hour, but it gives you that feeling like there are so many mysteries that are set up in this hour, they're never going to pay them off to my satisfaction. So if you watch further into the series, I don't know if he directed any more episodes, but I know he did the first one. In the second show, third show, fourth show, they start piling on those mysteries. And it feels like, oh man, this is going to be like the feeling most people had watching Lost times 100. They're just never going to pay these mysteries off. And then, in episode 6, they pay them all off in 10 minutes. And you realize it's fantastic. That's my opinion. I absolutely loved what that show turns out to be. Because they start to make it feel like not only is that strange little small town involving time travel, but also that time travel's rules are broken, and it gets stranger and stranger, and then in one fell swoop, they fix the entire thing in 10 seconds, and you realize, oh, that is a brilliantly simple concept. And and I actually really love that series right to the last episode of season 1, when the story ends forever, and can't possibly have a sequel until they made a season 2, which made no sense whatsoever. They just had big enough ratings to argue, but we could just do more of this, and there's no story to continue with. So, as usual,
One of those shows.
one of those shows. And they actually hung on to the possibility of a season 3 for far, far longer than they should have. They just kept holding out hope it might happen and didn't cancel the show for an entire year after season 2. And anyways, before we get to our next movie, let's pay the bills for a moment with these messages from these very important people.
If we're actually promoting other shows, I hardly think we're paying the bills. Is there any actual, like, paying advertisers? No.
And we only have another 30 seconds.
And after that, we have what?
14 minutes?
14 minutes?
Less. More
All right.
like 12 and a half.
All right. Plenty of time.
Isn't laughing fun?
Oh, God.
Wednesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. If you like
Well, there's one I'll never play again.
We're talking about people who talk about comedy, then this show's for you.
What's the deal with...
What's funny? Next version.
See, you can tune in on YouTube and hear us crap on other
That's
shows.
somebody who doesn't understand ambient sound in the background coming in and out. Because they don't match.
Mm.
And we're back on CJLO 1690 AM, where the cool kids hang out. This is Cinema Smackdown, and we are smacking down hard. Our opinion...
Well, we're certainly in the bleakest period of Shyamalan's career.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that period has hit a new low.
Well.
Yep, that's right. New low, we all agree. We'll speak more of it.
Okay, well, fine.
At any rate, we go from his slight uptick...
For a TV pilot, fine,
yeah, I don't
fair
consider
enough.
it to have much to do with his career. But I do think
Considering that he was doing After Earth already as Damage Control.
Right.
That's like, I'm not quite on top of my game, and okay, I'll take this, I'll do a rewrite of the script, I'll do whatever the Will Smith family tells me to do, and I'll produce this film, and then it flopped massively.
Well, it's yet another... As soon as M. Night Shyamalan started to delve into CGI in a big way, which starts in Signs. Signs is the one where you go, wow, that looks awful and fake. What's going on?
Mind you, we do get a guy in a rubber suit. So.
Yeah, that's fine. That part's fine. But there's some moments with just blurry CGI. And as you go forward from that into...
Lady in the Water has a fair amount of it.
Oh, yeah, terrible stuff. And then The Last Airbender is just wall-to-wall CGI, and so is After Earth. The takeaway is, this guy doesn't know how to do that stuff. He and his team don't make good CGI movies whatsoever.
Well,
they
admittedly,
have no understanding.
Admittedly, stuff gets farmed off to a bunch of techs typing at a computer. But if you rely on that heavily, it's the animators will do a good job of this, right?
Well, explain this to me then. How is it that M. Night Shyamalan CGI movies look like After Earth, while John Carter looks like John Carter? And you might hate that movie, but
I do not hate that
amazing
movie,
in many chunks.
Mm-hmm.
There's a dog that chases John Carter throughout that movie, and that dog just looks real. That's my recollection. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember... And it's a fully CGI creature, just like a dog monster that he becomes friends with. And I remember watching the film thinking, well, that's the best little creature of its type I've seen.
Whereas opposed to all the evolved Earth monsters in After Earth look terrible.
Yeah, exactly. They just look, well, here's a real person and something fake.
Yeah, being menaced by a cartoon, again.
Yeah, I will always go back to my stop-motion skeletons with swords, or any
You don't
variation.
get better than Ray Harryhausen. I am perfectly willing to suspend my disbelief for any Ray Harryhausen go-motion type of...
Or any variation on a guy in a suit.
Mm-hmm.
It can be Stan Winston's crew, rest in peace Stan Winston, making aliens. The Predator creature still actually looks like something, as long as it's not a CGI version of that something.
Right.
Anything. Pumpkinhead. Go back and see Pumpkinhead, folks.
Yeah.
That monster looks like they found it in the woods and filmed it. It does not for an instant look like a guy in a suit or some fake thing that's on a plate behind the actors.
Yeah, if you don't believe us, watch the first two Aliens movies for guys in suits looking fantastic,
and then
followed by the subsequent ones where they're computer-generated
and just
ugliness.
They're not there. There's no suspense.
They become video game creatures.
Yeah. I feel sad now. So, Shane, tell me about your journey to watching The Visit.
The Visit. Oh my god. So this was considered by many people to be a return to form for Shyamalan.
It made a lot of money.
Yeah, because after Earth, he went and made a very little, very modestly budgeted, found footage-y type of film about a couple of kids going to visit their estranged grandparents out in the boonies. And how people consider this a return to form for Shyamalan, I don't know. I think it's his worst work.
Well, they were all hoping that he would spin this off into a rap career.
Oh, God. So, yes, the rapping child in it who performs terrible rap music twice in the first 10 minutes, which made me reaching for the off button.
It made me want that character to die.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even a little bit of a joke. I just immediately was praying for that character to be the casualty that I would feel something about the other characters.
Honestly, the moment where he gets a filled adult diaper smeared in his face was not punishment enough for that character.
I forgot that was
Yeah, that's in the film. It has a couple of moments of horror movie creepiness that kind of work, but just made me laugh as opposed to finding it at all hair-raising. And it is saddled with the twist ending you will see coming from 10,000 miles away.
You know what's funny? I watched this movie with so little interest.
This was such a telegraphed twist ending. I spotted it back when Shyamalan was directing Rosie O'Donnell. It's how far out you can see this
I actually
coming.
wasn't remotely interested in this film, so I didn't even put an inkling of thought into what's that twist going to be. So when it comes around, I was like, oh, this has a twist. Oh, I guess that's a twist. But I will say I'm not gonna volunteer the idea that I got it right away, because I just didn't care.
See if you can figure this one out, Encyclopedia Brown. Kids who have never met their grandparents are sent out to meet them for the first time without anyone who has ever known or met them before. And they get picked up at the train, and they hang out with these people, and every time someone who knows the couple comes to visit, they conveniently do not see the actual couple the kids are staying with. What do you think the twist is?
Oh, I think the twist is that they see dead people and that the grandparents are ghosts.
And, the grandparents are secretly their superhero nemesis.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like that idea. At any rate, it's an awful movie. It is not, as far as I'm concerned, his worst film, although the rap scenes infuriated me, which just made me hate the movie from the first 10 minutes on. I was just angry at the film, which is never the best place to start from.
On the bright side, Shyamalan's nowhere to be found in it himself. So, there's that.
Does he have a cameo in After Earth?
No, he doesn't. So, unless he's one of the bird monsters. Don't think so.
I think he is.
Okay.
I'm going to argue that he is.
Right.
He's also the alien in Signs. He's the eagle in Lake in the Water. I mean, you gotta get your work where you grab that work where you can.
Because he wasn't in Lady in the Water enough.
Oh dear God, we're never going to be able to talk out how awful that cameo is.
Well, cameo. It's actually it's a pivotal role.
It's a pivotal role in an otherwise perfect film.
It's almost like if the big reveal in Psycho was that Hitchcock was killing everyone.
Oh my God, I would love that. Can we please build a time machine and go back and convince him to do that?
It's Hitchcock in dress the whole time.
I bet you there's an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents show that has that moment, though. Where the twist is he literally shows up and winks at the camera. I'm almost sure there is such an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
I don't think
Something where the ending really relies on his...
I have seen all the episodes he directed himself, and there's no such moment.
There is an episode of Tales from the Crypt that ends like that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Where the late 80s, early 90s scare-em comedy horror show that often had a lot of gore in it, these half-hour... There is an episode where the twist ending is, it's the host of the show.
Okay.
Believe it or not. It's not a, and he killed everybody ending, but it is a, this is where we were headed all along ending, which is hilariously terrible. But, at any rate, we were talking about the hilariously terrible career of M. Night Shyamalan, and as you were pointing out, as far as your
I think like I said, that performance of Jaden Smith tears down the foundations of After Earth, but I will say I think The Visit is his worst film, And like I
It's
said, how
certainly his
people
worst
can...
cast movie. Those kids are worse than... No,
Yeah.
that's saying a lot. They're not worse than Jaden Smith.
No,
but
they're not. No.
But they're up there. They're entirely unlikable.
I thought the girl was okay. I thought the boy was basically given annoying things to do, but if he'd been given a better
Right.
part, he could have been fine.
Right.
I thought the old people were good in it. Like there's the
they're
old lady's
fun.
very good. The old man's quite good. I was the mom not so much, but it's
the mom doesn't have a very big part.
no.
In fact, that actress is quite wonderful in many, many films, but not so much in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the, what? Something's happening? Mom.
Yeah, well, most of her role is happening over a computer screen, long distance calling.
But, one thing that's really worth mentioning to anyone who hasn't seen this movie, this is a found footage movie, which constantly makes you question, who found this footage and put it together?
It's not a found footage film. It is because the girl is making a documentary about seeing, meeting these grandparents and figuring out what the family history is.
I'm just saying found footage is kind of a...
Yeah. Well, that's
But at one point, it becomes a dueling found footage movie. At what point does the kid pick up his own camera?
Well, she gives him a camera at one point.
But it's not the beginning. It's into the movie.
Yeah, it's about half an hour into the film.
I actually found the movie pretty intolerable as of that moment. The gimmick that while these terrible things are happening, they're filming and filming and filming, which... the only movie I've ever seen do that in a way that I believed it was Cloverfield. Because halfway through Blair Witch, you'd be like, let's just run.
Yeah.
Screw this camera thing, let's just run. Whereas at least in Cloverfield...
Which is something they literally do in Behind the Mask, which is the slasher film one.
Let's let this thing go.
Yeah, at one point they said, okay, let's just stop filming, and then it becomes a normal film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Which I really ended up liking, but at the time I remember thinking, what, really?
But this one is filled with scenes where, okay, the old people are acting weird because they have some sort of dementia, and there's moments of, oh my god, let's hide from them, as opposed to, no, these are our grandparents. How about we check if they're all right? Grandma's projectile vomiting as she's walking around the house. The correct response to that is, oh my god, are you okay? Do we need to call the ambulance? Not, let's hide in our room and lock the door.
Right.
That's...
She's not a demon.
No, she's not a demon. She's just a human who's behaving weird at night because she's really old.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible movie. But I will continue to argue that it is like 1,000 times better than Glass. Which, the worst...
And how about Split?
I honestly... I hated Split so much when I saw it, and now it's like a breath of fresh air compared to Glass. That is how much I hate that movie. It has redefined my lowest low bar of what I'm willing to accept in a movie at this point.
I will say those two films are a return to form for Shyamalan, in that his return to form is divisive filmmaking that a lot of people go, oh, that was okay, and then a lot of other people go, I hate that guy.
I Hate That Guy is a good place to go out. We are about out of time. I have been Michael Brody. And
I don't hate you, M. Night. Call me.
And on that note, we will leave you for another 7 days. We'll be back soon to discuss the work of Michael Bay or somebody a little more uplifting.
Oh, no.
All yours.
Thank you. You guys saw Glass? Isn't it the new?
Yeah.
That's a new M.
Yeah, we're talking.
As I continue to argue about that film, the central premise of that movie is so broken. Like here's why these things are happening.
Yeah.
It's like that can't happen. It makes no sense.
Oh man.
That's it. That's how I walked out of that film.
You didn't like Split though.
No, I didn't care for Split. I left the DJ computer on.
Beautiful.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Your mics are up, but off.
And City Hall. An
I guess
SPDM
that's it.
report indicates a high cost in equipping all
You
officers with cameras.
probably know this, but